U.S. President Donald Trump says he called off a major U.S. attack on Iran planned for Tuesday after Washington's Gulf allies requested more time be given for diplomacy.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said he would do the impossible in order to stop the war with Israel as strikes continued despite a ceasefire.
With a recent Ebola outbreak, the U.S. has announced it will begin screening air travelers arriving from affected regions.
U.S. President Donald Trump said he decided to hold off on a major U.S. attack on Iran planned for Tuesday after Washington's allies in the Gulf requested more time be given for diplomatic efforts. The announcement of a planned renewal to the hostilities comes after weeks of stalled progress in ongoing negotiations between the United States and Iran. They also follow numerous threats by Trump to hit Tehran once more if it failed to enter into a nuclear deal with Washington soon.
We were getting ready to do a very major attack tomorrow. I've put it off for a little while, hopefully maybe forever, but possibly for a little while, because we've had very big discussions with Iran, and we'll see what they amount to. I was asked by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and some others if we could put it off for 2 or 3 days, a short period of time, because they think that they are getting very close to making a deal.
The two warring sides have traded several counters to a proposal to end the war, mediated by Pakistan, but according to negotiators, big differences are persisting and seem unlikely to break a stubborn impasse. The White House is seeking Iran's commitment to a complete abolishment of its nuclear ambitions, while Iran wants to maintain some of its nuclear infrastructure for what it says will be projects for civilian use. Trump has routinely warned that the war will not come to an end until Iran unconditionally agrees to never acquiring nuclear weapons and has expressed his country's readiness to fight for as long as it takes to achieve that.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said on Monday he would do the impossible in order to stop the war with Israel, as strikes continue to batter the country despite a ceasefire. Aoun's comments came as the Israeli army carried out a series of strikes in southern Lebanon, while the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah said it had struck a military target in northern Israel. Lebanon's health ministry said late on Sunday that 7 people had been killed in Israeli strikes that day, including 2 children. While a ceasefire was announced on April 17th and was extended for 45 days last week following U.S.-led talks, it has failed to stop the violence between Israel and Hezbollah, which have continued to launch strikes as they accuse each other of violating the agreement. Israel has also continued carrying out demolitions and issuing evacuation orders in the so-called Yellow Line, a swathe of southern Lebanon that Israeli forces have invaded and occupied, although officials have claimed Israel has no territorial ambitions there. On Monday, the Lebanese health ministry said the death toll from Israeli strikes since the start of the war had reached 3,020, with 211 people 18 and under and 116 healthcare workers among those killed.
With a recent Ebola outbreak now declared a global health emergency, the U.S. has announced it will begin screening air travelers arriving from 3 African countries. Passengers will now be checked at airports before entering the country, and non-U.S. passport holders who travel to Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or South Sudan in the past 21 days will face entry restrictions. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said it is monitoring the situation, but considers the risk of the virus to the U.S. general public as low. The decision comes after 1 American citizen tested positive for the virus in the DRC following exposure related to their work. The individual is being transferred to Germany for treatment. Meanwhile, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control said it was deploying experts to Africa's CDC in Ethiopia to help support the Ebola outbreak response. At least 100 deaths have been reported, with around 400 suspected cases as of Monday. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has called on the European Commission to relax its fiscal rules for households and industries struggling with rising energy costs. In a letter sent to Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Meloni said the bloc should treat energy security with the same level of urgency and importance as defence spending. Meloni argued security should not be measured just in military terms, but also by whether factories can continue operating, families can afford energy bills, and governments can maintain economic stability. Her call comes amid growing concerns that escalating tensions in the Middle East could trigger another energy crisis. Meloni argues that Brussels previously loosened its budget rules in response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as well as growing concerns over Europe's military preparedness. Italy is now seeking similar flexibility for emergency energy measures. Around 10 new suspected victims have come forward as part of a French probe into the network of late U.S. sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. France opened a human trafficking investigation after the U.S. Justice Department released the latest batch of the Epstein files in January. French magistrates are looking to investigate possible offences committed in France or involving French perpetrators who facilitated his crimes. The Paris prosecutor said in total around 20 suspected victims made themselves known, including about 10 who were already known to investigators.
Andriy Yermak, the former chief of staff of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, has been released on a €2.7 million bail after spending 4 days in custody as part of a major anti-corruption investigation. The bail was reportedly paid by multiple sources after Andriy Yermak said on the 13th of May that he could not afford to pay it himself and would rely on friends for help. According to Ukraine's anti-corruption investigators, Yermak is a suspect in a large money laundering probe tied to the construction of a luxury residence complex outside Kyiv. They're investigating a scheme where up to €9 million was laundered between 2021 and 2025 through the construction of the high-end residence complex. If convicted, Yermak could face up to 12 years in jail. Yermak and his lawyer denied wrongdoing, calling the charges unfounded. Yermak also vowed to appeal the court's ruling. Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau said last week that Zelensky has no connection to the corruption investigation.
Analysts are saying that Sunday's parliamentary elections in Cyprus could mark a historic shift in the political landscape as new political movements gain momentum. The two main parties, the Democratic Rally Party and the Communist Progressive Party of Working People, appear weaker in the polls than in previous years.
Είναι πολύ πιθανό να ανατραπεί το παραδοσιακό πολιτικό σκηνικό όπως το γνωρίζαμε εδώ και πολλά χρόνια στην Κύπρο. Και οι ανατροπές φαίνεται ότι είναι πολύ πιθανό να υπάρξουν σε ό,τι αφορά κατά πρώτον την είσοδο κομμάτων τα οποία παρουσιάζονται είτε ως αντισυστημικά είτε εξωσυστημικά.
Το βασικό δίπολο σε αυτή την εκλογική διαδικασία δεν είναι η δεξιά ή η αριστερά ποιος θα επικρατήσει, αλλά το σύστημα ή το αντισύστημα, ή αν θες από την άλλη η σοβαρότητα ή ο λαϊκισμός.
According to analysts, these elections also serve as a preview for the 2028 presidential elections.
Είναι σίγουρο ότι η νέα Βουλή θα διαφέρει αρκετά από την απερχόμενη. Για το ρυθμιστικό ρόλο, αυτό που λέμε αξονικό κόμμα, ερίζουν τουλάχιστον 3 κόμματα, το ΔΙΚΟ, το ΕΛΑΜ που εκφράζει την ακροδεξιά ή την ταυτοτική δεξιά στην Κύπρο και ένα νέο κόμμα του πρώην Γενικού Ελεγκτή, το ΑΛΜΑ.
With 19 parties and a total of 753 candidates seeking a seat in Parliament, Chief Elections Officer Eli Koselia said they had received a record number of candidacies and party lists submitted.
Iran used its appearance at the World Urban Forum in Baku this week to call for international support for post-war reconstruction. The country's deputy housing minister claims 150,000 homes were damaged since the start of the war, which began following joint U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. Euronews could not independently verify the overall scale of the damage due to multiple and contradictory figures. Kazemian also outlined Iran's broader urban pressures which predate the war.
به هر حال ایران هم با توجه به جمعیت حدود 90 میلیون نفر و حدود 70 میلیون نفر جمعیت شهرنشینی که داره طبیعتاً چالش‌های شهرنشینی خاص خودش داره، از جمله به هر حال افزایش تعداد شهرهای ما که به هر حال نیازمند خدمات شهری هستیم.
Rapid rural to urban migration has depopulated many villages while placing increasing strain on urban infrastructure. Kazemian said cities face challenges linked to water resources, climate change, and land subsidence. Iran is also highly vulnerable to earthquakes, which only adds to the housing crisis and makes rebuilding even more difficult.
A Spanish court has ordered the tax authority to refund Colombian pop star Shakira more than 55 million euros, which it ruled were improperly collected in a dispute over her taxes from 2011. The ruling concluded that tax authorities had failed to prove that the artist resided in Spain for more than 183 days, the required amount to be considered a tax resident in the country. She had in fact spent 163 days in the country, the ruling found. The Hips Don't Lie singer is now set to receive more than 55 million euros in the amount she had initially paid plus legal interest. Tax authorities had also argued she lived in Spain long enough to be liable for taxes between 2012 and 2014, but she reached a separate settlement for that case with prosecutors back in 2023, avoiding a broader fraud case. Following the verdict, she'd announced being treated as guilty for years, enduring brutal public shaming and orchestrated campaigns to destroy her reputation.